Maybe I'm going to be giving away our ages a little bit here, but I remember in 1941 at the Casa Manana, Charlie Barnet's band was playing there, and a young, tall, slim piano player was there, and his name was Bill Miller. And that's a long time ago, and here's Bill Miller.
Hi, Bill.
You remember those times?
Yes, I do.
And the orchestra, that was a great band in its day.
Oh, it was a ball. I loved it. Yeah.
How long did you play with them?
Oh, about 4 years.
I thought it was quite a bit of time there. You were on most of the hit records from, what,
40 to 42, I would say.
and Cherokee and all those things?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And now, after a number of years have passed, you're the accompanist and occasional conductor for Frank Sinatra.
That's true.
How long has this been going on?
You mean conducting or playing?
With Sinatra?
Oh, it's been about 18 years now.
That means since 52.
Just about.
And that means through 3 record companies, in a sense.
Yes, right.
I wonder, what does that entail? Now, I know Sinatra doesn't read music. Does this mean that you're the person who works with him on new tunes and so on?
Generally speaking, yes. Sometimes he'll listen to tapes or acetates and learns the song that way. And other times I just get keys and Frank's a fast study. It doesn't take him long to learn a song unless it's a very difficult one.
So how do you go about it? Who chooses the songs, for example?
Frank chooses 95% of them, I'd say.
How do they come to him?
Oh, various ways. They're sent in by many people, or he will ask somebody to write something special for him, or they may be from a show or a picture, a movie. Or he may just go through the old standards and decide he'd like to redo this one or that one.
Now, that's a common enough practice of his throughout the years. He's recorded the same material, in many cases, things that he's particularly fond of, several times, even more than once sometimes for the same record company.
That is true, too. He may want to do one version, then he may have an idea for another version and redo it another way.
Are there any particular songs that stand out in your mind in this way?
I can't think of any offhand. My goodness, we've recorded I don't know how many songs. There must be, I guess we averaged at least three albums a year for a long time. That would be, how many? My goodness, 50, 60 albums, you know. And with 10 to 12 sides an album, that's a lot of songs.
The latest one, the WATERTOWN, is a rather interesting thing. I'm not sure how completely convinced I am by it, but how was that done?
That was done in New York. It was done, there were tracks made, and Frank just dubbed in the voice later in Los Angeles at a later date.
Is that a practice he's followed at any other time?
That's the first time, well, outside of a couple of singles, when we were recording, he ran out of gas, so to speak, and we had to make a track, and he had to dub it in later. But outside of an accident, that is the first time we've done an album, let's say, that way.
Now, Sinatra is a person who seems to like and need an audience. And yet this was done in a totally different way, without an audience. I suppose he sat there or stood there with earphones and so on. Do you think that makes a difference in his way of doing things?
I don't think so. I think generally speaking, he would concentrate better without an audience. Now, on songs where he's so thoroughly familiar with them, then I think the audience inspires him to do things he might not ordinarily do. Little jokes or little innuendos.
I mean, things where he's deliberately playing to people and looking at them, and there's a laugh in his eyes as he does it.
That's right. That's right.
One thing we could do is, Mr. Miller, you were telling me, and I think the audience would enjoy hearing, some rather funny things about the recording with Frank Sinatra of the old Kipling thing, On the Road to Mandalay.
Yeah, that was fun. Well, as you know, we never really know what the arrangement was going to be like until I heard. And when we hear the arrangement On the Road to Mandalay, which Billy May wrote, he decided to change a few words, and in one area he used the word, or the phrase, there's a Burma broad, instead of... And then he decided to end the song instead of the lengthy ending that we had, he decided to end it on the lyric, when the dawn comes up like thunder, and then a Chinese gong sounded, and that was the end of the record.
And that was all unplanned.
Oh, yeah, right. What wasn't planned was the fact that it was also banned in England.
So this is a Sinatra record that was rated X by the British.
That's right.
Now, why was that?
Well, from what I understand, the Kipling heirs objected to it.
Did they hear it before it was released? Is that what happened?
I don't remember. I would imagine that they must have heard it.
They may have heard the American pressing, which probably came out first.
That's it, right.
So they wouldn't allow the various, it seemed to them, transgressions against the Kipling text to be heard by the British.
That's right. They just didn't like it.
That's a funny thing. Well, I think at this point we'll hear that record of On the Road to Mandalay. That's Billy May's arrangement, isn't it? You have a little background material on the recording of the song It Was a Very Good Year.
Well, simply that he heard the Kingston Trio doing their version of it. Well, I guess they wrote it. I'm not sure about that. He heard it being performed by the Kingston Trio on his car radio one day, and decided the lyrics were worth delving into, at which point he decided to do it as a ballad. It was very successful.
Well, it suited his mood of the time. That was right around the time of his 50th birthday, and the television show that came up at that time. And that record's on the September of My Years album.
That's right. As a matter of fact, that's probably what prompted him to do the whole album.
This was the first one of the group that he did, is that it?
We may not have recorded it first, but I would bet any amount of money that's what made him decide to do an album about a middle-aged gentleman.
We'll hear the song now. Now, the public impression that people have gotten of Frank Sinatra over the years through the newspapers and magazines is one thing, but the private impression of Frank Sinatra is a different thing. For example, I have the impression from what I have read by musicians and by musically oriented people that he's a much harder and more meticulous workman in his music than most people get the feeling of. Then I have to edit that. Than most people. The trouble is I've got a preposition there. Than most people would believe from what they have generally read.
I would say you're right. I know you're right. Frank, before any performance, whether it be recording or in a nightclub, always warms up for anywhere from, a half hour to 45 minutes, vocally.
I mean, he does vocal exercises.
That's right. He does just that, with or without the piano. Or sometimes I'm at the piano with him, and sometimes he does it alone. He can pick out certain notes, certain scales, etc.
This in spite of the fact that he can't read music.
That's right. He knows, he can pick out a few notes. When you say he can't read music, he doesn't read music per se, but he knows where certain notes are on the piano, and he can pick out certain notes on a music sheet. He can tell whether the music moves up or goes down, and also, for instance, when we're recording, he's a master at noticing that the band is either too loud in one area or too soft, or they're not heard in one area. Excuse me. He likes to shade the band himself. He knows when things should be softer than they are. And very often the dramatic impact of a certain recording is all due to his sensitivity about the whole thing.
How is his ear? That is he an artist with what they call perfect pitch?
He does not have perfect pitch, and he, as well as I, am probably glad that he hasn't. It's not an asset. But he has excellent relative pitch, and he has a natural instinct about intonation. I don't remember any time ever having heard him sing out of tune.
Over the years, there has been a change in what I would call the texture of Sinatra's voice. It's richer. It has more overtones, particularly, in a sense, more undertones. It sounds deeper than it used to sound, although he may still sing a song in the same key, but it sounds like he's singing it in a lower key, if you understand what I mean.
Well, I do. But you see, every man's voice drops a little bit as he gets older, or shall we say matures. It blossoms. One's voice as one gets older becomes more resonant as a rule, and particularly for a singer, he's trained that way. His voice is deeper. He has the same range. He can go perhaps a little lower now because of that very same thing. It may take more effort for him to sing the higher notes now, but he can still do it.
Well, I would like to say that having listened to a great many of his early recordings, the ones with Harry James, for example, the 9 sides he did with him in 1939, the first records he ever made, that it seems to me that a lot of what seems to be a difference in his voice in certain areas is the fact that the microphones were by no means as wide-ranging as they are now, particularly the microphones they used for voice in those days.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, we have such sophisticated equipment today. It almost makes anybody sound better.
Does he have a particular type of microphone that he likes? Is there some special make or brand that is his preference?
There might be, but I wouldn't know what that would be.
He certainly does have a way of using a microphone that you're never conscious of the microphone being there.
Well, I think that's his own microphone technique, if you will. He's a master at it.
Now, you were with him in the late days of the Columbia recording sessions, and all through the Capitol recording sessions, as well as the present ones with Reprise. There was a big change that began with the Capitol sessions, which I suppose was mostly a change in the style of orchestration that was used to support him. Do you recall anything about how this came about? Do you remember any discussions about it or anything?
Well, all I seem to remember is that when we went with Capitol, with different arrangers, Nelson Riddle, Billy May, to name 2, and a whole different attitude with the recording people. And he was allowed to choose his own material. That made a big difference. The last few years at Columbia, some of the material that they gave him was just horrible.
And he had no control over this at Columbia, is that it?
Apparently not. Not in the last 2 or 3 years.
Whereas at Capitol, he had carte blanche to choose whatever he wanted, and to choose the arrangers he wanted also.
That's right. Exactly right. And I think that made a big difference.
So perhaps you can say that beginning with the years at Capitol, we're hearing music recorded by Sinatra the way he wanted it, rather than the way recording executives wanted it.
That's right. That's exactly it. I think. If he hadn't had that choice, who knows? May have taken him a little longer.
Now, you've been with Sinatra for 18 years, as you described, but you've been in the music business for a good bit longer than that. And for instance, when you were with Charlie Barnet, Frank Sinatra was singing with Tommy Dorsey. So all these things have gone on for a long period of time. And you've heard a lot of other singers, probably all the important ones over the years. How do you put Sinatra in the perspective of American popular music through the years as you've seen it?
Well, the way I see it, he just got to be, he was and is probably the best all-around popular singer that I can remember. He knows how to handle ballads. He's so lyric conscious. He makes, seems to me like he makes, for instance, a lady or a woman feel like he's singing directly to them, which is an art. And when it comes to a rhythm tune, he has that, the ability to, no, I wouldn't say ad-lib too much, but he's got good time, and he kind of swings along with the arrangement.
And he occasionally will change a tune, change the melodic line a little bit. A few things I've heard him do in recent years. He has done little tricks very similar to things that Billie Holiday used to do.
To some degree. It's hard to compare, really. Frank doesn't ad-lib too much, and I don't think he should. He doesn't need to. It's not his style. Just enough to, shall we say, fit the mood, or no, change the mood to suit the way he feels at the time.
Well, that I think is one of his characteristics. When you listen to him sing, you sort of have an idea of exactly how he happens to be feeling at the time he's singing.
Oh, sure. If he's singing a happy song, he makes it seem twice as happy. Or he'll make if the band isn't up to par, for example, he will do something. I don't know. I really can't put my finger on it, but he'll do something to change the mood of the whole orchestra, even.
So that the band plays better than it even knows it can.
That's right.
He makes the band swing sometimes.
Sometimes, right.
There are certain characteristics of his performance that I've always noticed. One thing, for example, is that you never have a problem understanding the words. I've never heard a Sinatra, I've never heard a Sinatra recording where I missed a word here and there. The words are always very clear.
Well, like I said earlier, he's very lyric conscious, and being so, he would be careful of his enunciation.
But there's another factor I think even more important, and that's his sense of phrasing when you take a breath, and his ability not to take a breath for a long period of time. His breath control is really, by any musical standards, rather phenomenal.
Well, that's because he's worked on it.
His phrasing is one of the most distinctive features of his style, certainly. Now, does he work when he works with you, when he's rehearsing a song? or working it out. Does he work on the phrasing at that point?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I'd say most of the time he does, yes. To the point of even making little marks on the sheet music or on the professional copy as to where he might breathe. For instance, if we were going to record that night or the next time or the next night or whenever it might be. Very often he'll make little marks to remind himself to breathe here or not to breathe here or there. He'll mark a whole phrase sometimes, reminding himself not to breathe in that particular section at all.
And the ability of him, and the ability he has to sing 6 or 8 bars on one breath, or apparently on one breath, is one of the reasons certainly that he has to get himself into good physical condition when he's going to do a nightclub or a recording session or something of the sort.
Right. For example, if we have to, if we're going to, if he's going to perform, let's say, do 2 weeks in Las Vegas, he will very often, stop smoking perhaps, or maybe swim a little more for the few days before. I'm guessing now, maybe some breathing exercises, and tries to get a little more sleep. In other words, get in shape for a performance. Even to the point of not drinking.
I've been trying to think of something that's been recorded by Sinatra that we can have a sample of your pianistic ability with, and the only one I can come up with that has anything like a large chunk of it is the recording of One for My Baby.
I seem to remember it was a popular side, I know, out of that album. We had originally been doing it in clubs with just piano alone, and he decided, well, we'll have an arrangement to sort of build around the piano version, and it turned out very nicely.
It's a song that my voice deserts me. It's a song I've certainly been very fond of for a number of years, many years, and we'll hear it now with you, Bill Miller, Frank Sinatra, and Nelson Riddle, and the orchestra. We've been talking with Bill Miller, who has been and is Frank Sinatra's accompanist over a period of some 18 years, and there's no end in sight, fortunately. We've talked a good deal on the tape, and we've talked even more off the tape, and that's been a delight, and thank you very much.
My pleasure, Bill.